Microsoft Teams. Due to the COVID-19 pandemic, the Commission is meeting virtually. This meeting is being streamed live on the Port's YouTube channel. If you have a question or comment, please use the raise hand function to ensure everyone has an opportunity to speak. Also note that agenda item 1 under the consent agenda has been pulled and will be presented next month. With that, I'll call for a motion and second for approval of the regular commission meeting of the minutes of the regular commission meeting of May 12th, 2021.
So moved. Second.
Thank you. Pam, would you lead us through a roll call vote, please?
Commissioners Alexander, Kupro-Comas,
Aye.
Lamb,
Aye.
Levy,
Aye.
McDonald, Nemi, O'Halloran,
Aye.
Sumput, Strader.
Aye.
Thank you.
Pam, this is Commissioner Alexander. I just joined.
Very good. Did you want to vote on the approval of the minutes of the May 12th meeting?
Yes, I support
Very-
the approval of the minutes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. I'll ask Curtis to provide the Executive Director's report and remarks, please.
Thank you, Madam President. Good morning, Commissioners and Port staff and guests. Very nice to see everyone, albeit in a limited fashion this morning. First, I'd like to once again acknowledge the Port's monthly safety champions, which you'll see here on the screen, I hope, in just a second. Again, it's been an extraordinary year at the Port on safety and just a really remarkable time with the pandemic and a lot of other things going on. So the fact that these 4 employees have been highlighted, looking out for each other and for their own safety and for the safety of our business partners and customers is just a really great thing. So I'd like to ask Steve Danielson, who has been leading much of our safety effort throughout the Port and is sitting in for Stan today, to join us for the monthly safety message. Over to you, Steve.
Thank you, Curtis. The message today is that the Port is exercising our membership with the National Safety Council by promoting the National Safety Month 2021 campaign. Observed annually in June, this is the 25th year of that National Safety Month, which focuses on reducing leading causes of distraction, injury, and death. We are highlighting the emphasis topic each week in June with our internal safety committee teams, construction project teams, and our tenant safety advisory group. Week 1 is prevent incidents before they start. Identifying risks and taking proactive safety measures to reduce exposure on important topics from ergonomics to chemical management is crucial to creating a safe workplace. Week 2 is addressing ongoing COVID-19 safety concerns. As the pandemic continues, employers play an important role in expanding operations and returning remote workers to physical workspaces, building trust around vaccines, supporting mental health, and so much more. Week 3 is feel safe on the job. Being able to be oneself at work without fear of retaliation is necessary for an inclusive safety culture. Leading organizations focus not only on physical safety, but psychological safety as well. And finally, week 4 will be advancing our safety journey. Safety is all about continuous improvement. Forward-leaning organizations have been using human and organizational performance elements to continue the learning and improvements within their organizations. Further, as we do every year in June, the Port has engaged all employees to recommit to a zero-harm workplace for themselves and their coworkers by completing our safety and health policy e-learning course, which is narrated by Curtis. The Port is on the brink of completing a very successful fiscal year of employee safety and health. Thank you, and that's my safety message.
Great, thanks, Steve. And I'm just going to take a moment here to thank Steve. I know, commissioners, you've heard from me how important this is to us as an organization, and really what it entails is a push on culture to change the way we think about safety. And Steve has just really provided a leadership role inside the Port, and I want to thank him personally in front of all of you for helping us get there and guide us. As I've noted before, we are it looks like at the brink of, or having just delivered the safest year in port history, and it's still not safe enough. We're working our way towards zero, but Steve, I really want to thank you for your extraordinary work on behalf of everyone at the port. So thank you, and thanks for the message this morning. I'll continue here just to note Governor Brown announced last week that she's going to lift most state COVID-19 restrictions after reaching the 70% statewide vaccine threshold. This is meaningful for us, both as an employer and an operator of a lot of public facilities. Masks are still required at PDX under federal guidance, even with the CDC's new guidance for those who are vaccinated. So until further notice, passengers at PDX will still be required to wear masks. This month, our PDX musicians and in-person information booth volunteers will begin a gradual return to the airport with a plan to bring back roving volunteers this summer in July. Very excited about that. It's a really important part of the customer experience, and happy to get our musicians back in there too. It's great for them to be able to promote their own music. The PDX Red Lot vaccine clinic will provide the last vaccinations on June 19th. So late next week will be the end of the Red Lot vaccine clinic, and it has been extraordinary. As we've talked about before, in under 5 months, we vaccinated more than 250,000 people at the PDX Red Lot. That's due to an extraordinary bunch of volunteers and just very meaningful partnership with OHSU and the Red Cross. And particularly, I want to give a shout out to the port's maintenance team and operations and logistics teams who have really stepped up and gone above and beyond to make this possible. We did just wrap up APA Heritage Month and Mental Health Awareness Month at the port, and we're now celebrating Pride Month in June and Juneteenth next week, which the port will now offer as a paid holiday this year. Our colleagues also led a discussion about the Tulsa race massacres since last week marked the 100th anniversary of the extraordinary tragic event in Tulsa. Last month, we partnered with the governor and Cathay Pacific Airways to deliver 300,000 Binax Now rapid COVID-19 tests to Mumbai, India. These tests will be delivered to the Desai Foundation, an organization that serves rural communities in India with health and livelihood programs focused on women and children. You may remember that last May, Cathay Pacific partnered with us in the state to bring 1 million 3-ply surgical masks into Oregon at a time when they were in extremely short supply for frontline healthcare workers. We're just really pleased and continue to be grateful for the partnership with Cathay Pacific, both in this unique instance, but also in connecting Oregon to the world. So with that, Madam President, I'll close my remarks this morning. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Curtis. I'll call for a motion in second to approve the Executive Director's report.
So moved. Second.
Thank you, Pam. I will note that written comments were received from Mickey Barnes, a resident of Banks, regarding the Hillsborough Airport. Those comments were shared with the Commission this morning. I don't believe we have other public comment. Pam, could you confirm?
That is correct.
Thank you. So with that, I'll call on Keith Levitt to introduce the general discussion item.
Great. Good morning, commissioners. And, it was in our public comment portion of the agenda 2 months ago when we heard from a citizen neighbor of ours out along Northeast 33rd about all of the issues going on with some camping issues, dumping issues, and a lot of cleanup that we really needed to take care of. And our team has been working on that. We shared out some pictures last month. But what we committed to you at that time was to come back with a more comprehensive kind of overview of the way that we are approaching this multi-layer set of complex issues with homeless camping and safety and leading with compassion and kind of working in the community in a way that is productive. So I'm just very thankful for this team. It's a much broader group, but it is led by Emerald Bogue, who will, I know, take the lead on the slides here. Nicole Miranda on our properties team, and Captain Corey Chase, obviously from our police force. They'll share out a lot of the work done here, and we'll, I think there's a lot of learning that we can do from Northeast 33rd that we can then take to some of the other sites that we are experiencing similar issues. So with that, I'm going to ask Emerald to take it from here.
Good morning, and we can go ahead and advance the slide deck. There we go. So it's no surprise to you all that certainly this is a national challenge that's particularly severe in Oregon when it comes to people living outside. 35 to 10,000 Oregonians experience homelessness, and that makes us the 4th highest in the nation, and 61% of that population is living unsheltered. As you know, there's a much broader definition of homelessness than people living outside. Just as poverty disproportionately affects minorities, so does homelessness. They're definitely overrepresented in this population. And of course, the challenge is complex, and so the solutions are multifaceted and most certainly not simple. Housing remains the main solution, more affordable housing and more permanent supportive housing. So that means that, you have housing, but also support for people who are experiencing a lot of challenges to stay in housing, behavioral health support, addiction services, et cetera. Rent assistance. There's a lot of people living on the brink of homelessness, and rent assistance is very important in keeping these challenges at the current level, which is basically unsustainable, but still. And then policies aimed at reducing displacement and increasing density. And of course, a high functioning shelter system. There's a lot of discussions right now regionally about, with limited funds, what should come first, housing or shelter. Really, it's both that are very essential. Go ahead, next slide. Regionally, there are several local governments really working and focusing on this, and they all play different roles. A couple things that are notable recently at the city of Portland, the city has worked on a document called the Shelter to Housing Continuum. And this is a set of code updates and small steps the city could take to move people more swiftly into shelter and hopefully clear some of the bottlenecks that get people into housing. The city's also stepping up their efforts in cleanup, as we have all read in the newspaper, and they're also collaborating with other governments who own properties. That's us, that's ODOT, and that's other governments like the Multnomah County Drainage District and Multnomah County and others to have a coordinated effort around cleanup of property across the city of Portland. We've talked to you all before about the Metro Removal of Illegal Dumping Patrol, also known as the RID program. The Metro Regional Government has this program. They actually fund it out of solid waste fees, of all things, but they take a trauma-informed approach to working with vulnerable populations. They handle the posting and cleanup of camps and the storage of materials. The challenge became significant enough for the port in a few years back that we did enter a formal partnership with the RID program in 2019. And pre-COVID-19, it was it was working pretty well to keep some of the challenges at a manageable level, but there's been a lot of factors since 2020 that have made it more challenging. And of course, all of these governments are focused on affordable and permanent supportive housing in their own ways. Some have passed funding measures related to this, and others are really dealing with the funnel through of state and federal dollars that are used for this purpose. Go ahead, next slide. Nicole.
Thank you, Emerald. Good morning, commissioners. I'm here to talk to you about what's the port's role in the port's context with this, with these homeless situations in the Portland metro area. The port owns thousands of acres of undeveloped property. Some of the property has natural resource value for mitigation. For example, port's property on Government Island. Some of the port's undeveloped property is in our active portfolio for business development. For example, our undeveloped lots at Tripp and Gresham Vista Business Park. Internally, the port has established guidelines and a cross-functional internal team comprised of business development and property staff, natural resources, legal, risk, public safety and security, public affairs, and with staff mentoring from our diversity, equity, and inclusion staff. This group focuses on best practices to preserve the port's property for its highest and best use. We've also recently started a senior leadership team to approach these issues more globally, internally, and externally. One thing this cross-functional team does is we review collected data to help us understand the challenges with the port's undeveloped property. We collect this data from the Corrective Action Plan system. Port staff can enter information to the system on camps and illegal dumping on port property, and each site is ranked based on its environmental impacts and safety concerns so that we can focus the port's resources on safely addressing sites that have the greatest impact on employee and community safety. And as Emerald alluded to in her last slide, the port's ability, COVID has severely impacted the port's ability to quickly address camping and dumping issues on port property. And all organizations have changed their guidelines for handling camps and illegal dumping. And for a few months there was limited field staff and limited resources for cleanup, which then led to impacts we saw at the port's property at Northeast 33rd, which was presented one of the public discussion items at the April Commission. Next slide, please. Adding to the complexities for the port to address camping and illegal dumping on its property is the task to ensure that to separate unauthorized camping from illegal dumping. Separating illegal dumping from items in and around campsites are more challenging to address, as the port must ensure that the items it removes are discarded trash and can't be claimed by someone as personal property per the law. There are areas where the port has determined dumping has no nexus to a camp, and those are places that we can remove dumped items quickly without posting or notice. Other factors include that there are hazardous materials in the illegal dumps areas and in the campsites, and that means we have to hire and schedule contractors who are equipped to handle these materials. This port team has always taken a human-centered approach to handling unauthorized camping on the port property, and what I mean by that is that we give the people who are camping more time to separate their personal property from items to discard. The port also requests social service groups make contact with the campers to see what services they need to assist them. This also adds time to our cleanup schedule, but it is the moral and the compassionate approach to this matter.
And Nicole, I'll just add here that if you look at all of these considerations and complexities, really, these were the things that drove our partnership with the Metro removal of illegal dumping patrol with the RID program.
Yes.
Because they really just are a government that decided to take a leading role in creating a human-centered approach that provided some consistency across jurisdictions. That program is still up and running. We will continue to work with that program, but we are recognizing that the complexities go far beyond, that program and its ability to sufficiently address the challenge at the scale it exists now.
Yes, thank you, Emerald. Thank you.
Yeah.
We also, the port has to contend with a patchwork of jurisdictional responsibility in and around its properties, using, again, Northeast 33rd as an example, because that's been brought up to the commission. We have Northeast 33rd, it's a city right-of-way. PBOT is in charge of that. So we had to coordinate with PBOT to help us remove vehicles away from the edge of the road, so we were able to access our property to clean up. That takes meetings and coordination to make sure that's on everybody's schedules, so that all these items can happen at one time. And finally, but not least, public safety is of paramount importance. We have to ensure that any criminal activities that have been reported on port property in any way are resolved before we can allow any port staff, any vendor or contractor to go out on the site. We have been overseeing a comprehensive cleanup of the port's property between Northeast 33rd and Sunderland. And the next slides I'll hand it over to Captain Corey Chase to discuss how this cleanup endeavor is progressing. Thank you.
All right, good morning, commissioners. So I'm going to talk a little bit about just how we approached the cleanup out there at Northeast 33rd and Sunderland. And to kind of echo what Emerald and Nicole discussed previously with regard to the COVID pandemic and how it had impacted our operation. And, we had kind of reprioritized some of our things, as most agencies did in the region. So we did see an increase in activity out there at Northeast 33rd, and we saw an influx of people camping and illegally dumping material on our property out there. But as we've increased our vaccination level in the police department, and we are getting back to more normal operations, I would say, we went out there to notify those folks that were on our property unlawfully that they would need to leave the property. And when we do that, we go out there, we took a large team of our police officers, and we went out there and provided them with written notice that they were trespassing on port property. And we gave them 7 days to make arrangements to remove their personal property or to relocate vehicles, RVs, camps, etc., out there. And so once we were out there, we made it a point to have personal contact with as many people as we could come in contact with that were on the site. So we weren't just going out there and just leaving a piece of paper on their, on their windshield, so to speak. It was trying to make personal contact, finding out if they had someplace else to go, what resources they had tried to access, and if they needed any further assistance from us or from our partners in the metro area. All of the people that we had direct contact with assured us that they would be able to meet the timeline of 7 days and remove their camps and their personal property. Nobody asked for additional resources that we were able to contact out there. So we provided them with the notice, and when we came back 7 days later with our contractor to begin the cleanup, most of the folks that were out there had complied and had removed their stuff. We did not take an enforcement approach when we were out there at the conclusion of that 7-day period. We continued to work with those folks and help them if we needed to grant them a little bit more time to remove their property and their vehicles. But all of those that we spoke with and all of those that we gave notice to were actively working to remove their stuff. And some of them needed a little bit more time, and they were granted that extension. while we were out there, I asked some of our officers to just do some interviews, some follow-up interviews with the folks that were on the property, again, to just assure us that that there was no additional services that we could help provide for them, and then also to kind of help point them in the right direction if they needed any assistance. So once we were able to post the notice and get the contractors out there, and I think we can advance the slide. The next slide will show. This is kind of what we encountered out there. We cleaned up a lot of the property, and the pictures that you can see on there are what's left after the cleanup last week. And again, some cleanup was still taking place yesterday, and the barriers were going up. So along the roadway, the barriers are all being installed out there, which will block the access for vehicles to be able to access that property. There's still some piles of debris that will need to be removed, and then the signage will be installed, and we will have a much better handle, I think, on that property out there. And I think the next slide, if you want to advance it one more slide. Oh, it's back to Emerald on that one, sorry. But anyways, our ongoing approach to this is going to be a much quicker response. We're going to ask our officers to be aware of the property out there, the cleanup efforts, and to just continue to make personal connections with those folks that may show up out there, and continue to work with them to provide them with some alternative resources and to help steer them in the right direction. And I do think it's worth noting that one of our officers actually received a positive commendation from a member of the community for their compassion and their interaction with folks while this was going on out there. So that was very nice to hear, very encouraging. And we did receive a lot of positive comments and positive interaction from the community members that were happy that we were taking the approach that we were taking, helping folks to get the resources that they needed, to let them know that we needed to help clean up the situation out there, but that we were taking that trauma-informed approach, and we were being respectful and compassionate of the folks that were there, and also doing what we needed to do to make that property safe and clean again. So with that, I'll turn it back over to you, Emerald.
Great. So, going forward, we continue to own a lot of undeveloped property, and as such, this is a challenge we will continue to deal with, yes, on 33rd, and yes, on other pieces of property as well. We've definitely had some other camps on some significant sites in other parts of the city as well. So we will continue to collaborate with these jurisdictional partners, particularly the RID program. It is a good model. And it's a model that works really well when it's operating at the right scale. We have to continue working with the Portland Police Bureau. So you heard from Captain Chase today, but we do have some challenges that exist on properties that are outside of the jurisdiction of the Portland Police Department and are the jurisdiction of the Portland Police Bureau. So when we're dealing with enforcement activities, that's an area where we work to coordinate. Just as we work to coordinate with PBOT, the Portland Bureau of Transportation, on issues around vehicles in the roadway. And that is an acronym that really just does not roll off the tongue, but Homelessness and Urban Camping Reduction Program. That's a table set by the city to pull in jurisdictional partners and to just coordinate approach to reduce the impacts of homelessness, understanding that that it impacts most severely the people who are experiencing it. Priorities, as we've stated before in the presentation: safety, responsible property management, and compassion for people living outside. With that, I will wrap it up and ask you if you have any questions.
Thank you so much to all of you for that. Obviously, a lot of work on a difficult situation with lots of complexities involved in it. I will call on, sorry, I'm having trouble here with, I have a raised hand. Commissioner Sampat, please.
Yes. Again, play as Multnomah County and the city of Portland tackle this. This has been a hot issue.
Thank you for that question, Commissioner Sampat. Yes. So we've particularly worked with the city of Portland in the grand scheme of local governments and
Good morning, and I wanted to echo the thanks and particularly the gratitude for dealing with this situation with such graciousness. And I just wanted to encourage you to continue. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Alexander?
Yes, thank you, Madam President. And I also would send my thanks and my appreciation for the thoughtful approach the port has taken. You know, it's not unusual for us to be involved in a global issue, but look to position ourselves in a way that uniquely are lots of things. The one thing that raised, I have to say, is the acronym RID. It sounds and feels very pejorative to me. For us, we're talking about a people-centered approach, but there are elements within this community where it's not about moving trash, it's about moving people. And I just hope that there's a way to distinguish and to have that dog whistle distance from how the port is responding to this. It feels and sounds very unsympathetic and people focused. And you know, there's lots of ways of putting together trash removal, or I mean, we can call it something other than RID. RID will have an appeal to folks whose motives are very different than ours. So I would just offer that. And I understand you didn't title it, but at the end of the day, if you're on the inside of how that's going to be defined, I think it's very important for us to indicate what we stand for and what we don't stand for. Thank you.
Commissioner Alexander, I think that's really important. It is an unfortunate acronym, and I will carry that feedback to Metro. And I think in the meantime, at the Port of Portland, we will just get in the habit of not using the acronym and just calling it the removal of illegal dumping, right? And we'll call it that until or unless Metro changes the name of their program. But I think it's an important call out, and thank you.
Thank you again to the team and commissioners for your input and insight here. Again, this is clearly an important issue to our community. And having a people-centered, trauma-informed approach, I think, is really important here. As we as a community, more broadly than the port, try and find ways to support those who've been left behind. So thank you. We'll move forward with the consent agenda, and I'll ask if any commissioner wants a presentation on any of the consent items, noting again that the first of the consent items was removed from the agenda for today. So the consent item that we'll be voting on is the City of Sandy Enterprise Zone reauthorization. Does anyone need a presentation on that? Okay, seeing none, I will call for motion and second for approval of that consent item.
Motion.
Second.
Thank you. Pam, would you lead us through the vote, please?
Yes, Commissioners Alexander,
Aye.
Cooper Comas,
Aye.
Lamb,
Aye.
Levy,
Aye.
McDonald,
Aye.
Nemi,
Aye.
O'Halloran,
Aye.
Sumput,
Aye.
and Strader.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you, Pam. We'll move on to the action items and call on Chris Zarnecki to introduce the first agenda item.
Hi, good morning. Thank you. Slated for used to be the children's play area, and when Alaska moves to their new home in Concourse B, that children's play area will be put back at the end of Concourse C. So jumping into the business terms here, our standard retail lease employees in a manner consistent with what the board expects. And with that, here's our next steps. They're currently at the end of their design and permitting process. They'll begin construction in July, and they'll intend to be opening in October of 2020. And with that, this is the recommendation. Oh, perfect. It looks like we're back online. And with that, I will take any questions you all might have.
Thank you very much. Any questions from the commission? Okay, seeing none, I'll call for a motion and second to approve the executive director's recommendation with respect to this lease.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you, Pam.
Commissioners Alexander,
Aye.
Cooper-Comas,
Aye.
Lamb,
Aye.
Levy. Commissioner Levy,
Aye.
McDonald, oh, thank you. McDonald,
Aye.
Nemi,
Aye.
O'Halloran,
Aye.
Sumput,
Aye.
and Strader.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you, Pam. Chris Zarnicki will now introduce our next item, which is General Services Administration lease.
Great, thank you again. This next one is a long-term lease with the General Services Administration for office space with the Transportation Security Administration. And I'm going to channel something that our previous COO used to say, Vince Granado, a lot, that at PDX we have the best relationship between the airport and the TSA of any airport in the United States. And I believe that to be absolutely true. And we appreciate the partnership, collaboration, and focus on the customer experience that TSA here locally has is we believe their ability to have their offices in a space adjacent to PDX. And this is very unique in airports in the United States. And we took advantage of this going back to 2010 when the port offices moved out of the mezzanine at PDX and into the new HQ building. And we were able to lease space, support an office space to TSA. And over the years, just having them here in the building has been a tremendous benefit. So with that, our Senior Manager of Terminal Leasing and Airline Affairs, Willie Wilcoxon, is here to present the agenda item for your approval. Willie?
Excuse me. Thanks, Chris. I appreciate it. Good morning, Commission. I'm happy to be here. I'm probably overly happy to be here just because it's been a long time coming for this lease to come to fruition and bring it to the finish line and presenting before you guys today. So I appreciate the time on the agenda today. As you will recall, back in February, the Ports Director of PDX Next, Chris Neal, gave the Commission an update about the suite of projects that are occurring around the airport. He did go into detail about the rental car center. It's a multi-story building with the rental car customer service and lobby at the first floor and TSA operations and port police on the above floors. So today we're getting approval to lease up one of those floors. So we're quite excited. Before I jump into the presentation, I'd also like to welcome the Federal Security Director of TSA, Mr. Stephen Tabor, who is online today and would like to give some remarks to the Commission following my presentation. First slide, please. So let's go into a little bit of TSA background that I think is noteworthy. The TSA workforce, they're 47,000 deep across the country, working at about 440 federalized airports. They have 500 employees at PDX. Now that 500 employees at PDX represents TSA being among the larger employer at PDX. With that, we also are committed to diversity, equity, and inclusion, and TSA shares that philosophy that the port does. So I'd like to quote TSA and Mr. Tabor with the following. TSA respects the unique characteristics and contributions of each individual employee and believes our workforce should reflect the population to which we serve, including a diversity of thought, experience, and personal background. The training programs, TSA takes great pride in their ongoing training programs. So when an officer comes to TSA, they're just not on the job training, and once they're comfortable, that's it. TSA takes pride in their ongoing training, which helps in the promotional opportunities of their workforce. As we know, protocols, policies, There was workers here. Here they once the from his values just move appropriate.
Traveling public, our stakeholders, and our airport workers safe. We do this in partnership with the Port of Portland Police Department and the Airport Security Department. The TSA has been a partner here in Portland since 2002, and for the last 11 years, we've had the ability and the pleasure to have our offices on airport property. This has been a real benefit to our agency as it has increased our oversight of operations, improved our response times, and allowed us to maintain a strong bond with our employees. With the PDX Next project, there was a possibility that we would have to relocate to an off-site office, which would have greatly impacted our abilities in these areas. Through partnership and cooperation with the Port of Portland, my staff, the TSA Real Estate Office, and the General Services Administration, we've been able to create a lease agreement that will allow us to occupy space in the new RCC building, keeping us on airport property. The RCC building will place all public safety and security assets together, allowing for greater communication, partnership, collaboration, and response during emergency situations. None of this would have been possible without the support of the Port Senior Leadership Team, the PDX Next team, and of course, Willie Wilcoxon and all the work he's done with this lease agreement. I've worked at a lot of airports in my TSA career, and as has been said, Portland holds a special place, especially in my heart, and that's because of the partnerships and the bonds that we've built over the years. I've worked here in Portland on and off for the last 14 years, and it's an airport that I will always be happy to come back to. It's truly a pleasure for me to work here. As a federal security director, I fully support this lease agreement and I urge your approval. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Tabor and Mr. Wilcoxon. We appreciate the partnership on this important function. If there are no other questions or comments from the commission, I will call for a motion and second to approve the lease.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Pam?
Commissioners Alexander,
Aye.
Cooper Comas,
Aye.
Lamb,
Aye.
Levy,
Aye.
McDonald,
Aye.
Nemi,
Aye.
O'Halloran,
Aye.
Sumput,
Aye.
and Strader.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you, Pam. We will call on Vince Granado to introduce the next agenda item, please.
Thank you and good morning. It's been a couple months since we've been in front of you, but there's a lot that's been going on here. So I have George with me and he's going to be asking for your approval to amend the Hoffman-Skanska contract again. We're going to do some work on the bag handling system and some other miscellaneous construction work. But before we get into the specifics of that request, we wanted to just give you some photos, and George will do that about the work that's been going on for the last few months. It's been very busy. So we moved the old concourse corridor connector. We relocated the queue on the security checkpoints, closed the Clock Tower Plaza, the old Oregon Market, took down famous Louis Buntz painting, and it'll go back up at some point in time. And we started fabricating the new roof across the field. So a lot of just physical things that are going on. You know, the budget's still tracking pretty well, but the material prices that you've probably seen out in the media are putting some pressure on us, but we're still monitoring that closely. In July, we're going to start to move folks that are in the terminals, as Willie just talked about, with the TSA. They're going to move over to the new office building, but so will Port Police, Comm Center, security badging. And that allows for the heavy demolition work that'll begin in the old terminal building. So a lot happening in the terminal building. And again, we're still on track to open the parking garage and remodeled Concourse B in November as well. So there's just a tremendous amount of work that's going on. So we're going to continue to come back regularly, give you some photos and some updates. And that's what I'll have George do right now before he gets into the formal request for approval. So George, you want to take it from here?
Thanks, Vince. I got it. Next slide, please. So as Vince mentioned, we're here to ask for a request for about $75 million for upgrades to the baggage handling system, tenant relocations, and miscellaneous construction activities for T-Corp. That also includes a modification to the TSA check bag resolution area, the Zebra area, that is being implemented as a part of the T-Corp project because of the adjacencies and the cost-effective construction. So about 55 million of this is T-Corp, 20 million of this is Zebra. Next slide, please. So as Vince mentioned, we were last in front of commission, I think in March, and the expectation was the next week and the week after we would move the concourse connector. So this was step 5 of the 12-step program to construct the terminal building. When I presented, I think it was in December. In this case, we had talked about building paths for the passengers to get safely around the construction site. Next slide. So here's a brief video of the concourse connector, half of the concourse connector moving out. So the next week after the commission meeting, over the course of one night, we took about a 1.8 million pound half of the concourse connector, took it around the end of concourse C. Went pretty smoothly, except for a couple of flat tires that we had to replace in the SPMTs, the self-propelled mobile transport. So they then took around the end of C, the next day lifted over the trash node, put it into place. Now it is being constructed, and I'll show some pictures of that, of extending the end pieces. So on the south side here, it goes from where the Hollywood Theater was to Old Gate B1, and on the north side, it'll go from Gate E1 to Gate D3. And then when this is complete, it will allow passengers to go through the connector and the new bypasses and get around the construction activity. Next slide. So here's just a series of pictures. I'll walk through what's been going on. On the left side, the alleyway, one of the big risk items in the project was relocating the fuel system that was in the footprint of the Western expansion out of that footprint. So in this case, we had to jack and bore piping underneath concourse C and D to get the fuel system out of the area. That work has been complete now. The center drawing is now the connectors moved out of the way, working on the columns and the piles for supporting the new roof structure, and we're drilling those piles. And then just a series of utility work that's going on in the alleyway that is pretty well 3/4 of the way complete, and we should be done hopefully by the end of the summer. Next slide. The bypasses have now been moved out of the way, and they're constructing those extension pieces to connect them to the concourses. And the design right now, or this construction schedule, is in September. We will open up first the north side and then the south side towards the end of September. Next slide. Vincent mentioned the clock tower. The clock tower is actually no longer there as of this point in time, but this was like the first week after we shut down the Oregon market, opened up the new throats as shown here on the left side. This is the DE checkpoint. So the existing throats, as you went down the escalators from the garages, are closed off. To the south of Alaska is new opening to go to the B and C concourses. To where the old Delta ticket counters were has now been opened up a throat to get into TSA and go into the DE checkpoints. And then the Oregon market, we've been working our way through demolition, and we really start to heavy demolition as staff and functions move out of the mezzanine in the next month or so. Next slide. So a lot of construction activities going on in the concourses and the intersections between the buildings. Concourse D on the left side, restrooms are being constructed that will be operational, I believe, in September timeframe. And on the right side, the moving walkways to the end of Concourse C, we're also starting at the end of Concourse D, are being removed because the Western expansion would intersect those areas, and there's going to be a different elevation between as you walk out of the terminal and walk into the concourses. So that work's also being accomplished as we speak. Next slide. Commission last year, one of the first items Commission approved was to prep work to prepare the columns that are going to hold up the roof. They're existing in the existing building. So at this point in time, there are 6 columns, mega column pile caps. 3 of them have been fully complete, as you see on the right-hand side. 3 of them are in construction. By the November timeframe, all of those will be complete, and that's working very well. It's a very, very complex process to try to drill 16 to 18 piles 150 feet deep within the existing building on very low, very tight clearances, and it's been working very successfully to date. Next slide. And probably the most excitement here is the roof. The roof's being constructed out by the fire station, the prefabrication facility. We put down, I think it was 15 acres of concrete to hold up the roof. It's being constructed, pre-constructed in that area, and then it'll be disassembled in the very big sections that I've shown Commission and moved over into place. All of the 6 center section girders, so 390-foot long steel, 6-foot tall by 20-foot wide box girders to hold the glulam beams are up. And here's a couple of pictures of the first initial glulam beams. I think there's about 430 of them total that were going in. We've got probably 8 to 10 of them installed at this point, but they put the beams in. You see on the right side, the roof decking is being installed. Then we'll waterproof on top of that. And then underneath the beams, we'll run all the mechanical and electrical services that'll sit on top of those. And then next year, in the springtime, the roof will start getting disassembled and brought over and put into place. Next slides. So schedule, this is, I think, 21 or 22 that we've been in front of commission, and we'll still have a continuous series of design, construction, commissioning, contract amendments we'll be bringing forward. Design is kind of winding down now. The expectation will be done with really the vast majority of design, except for a couple of maybe tenant improvement work activities by the September timeframe. At that point, we will bid the final design package, which is the finishes work, and hopefully establish a GMP, and we'll bring back the commission in either the December or January commission. We're on schedule with the construction of Concourse B for going live early in November. And then, as you see, a lot of construction activity on the Western expansion, and we're scheduled for the Western expansion towards the end of 23, and then the remainder of the work through 24 and 25. Next slide. So this is just a summary of the previous contracts amendment the commission has approved for the Hoffman-Skanska joint venture, starting in May of 2018 with the pre-construction services. 2019 was some of the prep work and the projects that we rolled into for cost effectiveness into T-Core, Concourse B in 2019. And then really through 2020 was really kicking off the major portions of the T-Core construction, kind of culminating with the structure and envelope in August for $230 million. And then in December, which was really the demolition, early MEP, and the logistics to get us up to almost $800 million in approval at this point. Next slide. We anticipate coming back to commission really throughout the summer. Probably, I think in August, there'll be amendment to the ZGF contract amendment, ZGF design for construction administration services. There'll be a couple, maybe testing at that point. Also for the Hoffman-Skanska construction, maybe some additional miscellaneous towards the end of the year, and then an establishment of the GMP, hopefully December, maybe January of next year. And then we may be back for the installation and design of the TSA automated security lanes next year, although we may roll that in to the end of year GMP. We're still working through the details of that. Next. So Vince mentioned there's challenges to the budget with materials and just kind of the escalation coming out of COVID right now, but we're still tracking to be on budget with contingency at about overall 10% of the overall project. Construction small business participation goal is 20%. We're running a little bit light on that, but the team's working with Kimberly's team to drive that up, and especially as we get the design package F, which is all the finishes, there'll be additional opportunities for small businesses. The design small business goal is 10%. We're tracking almost exactly on 10% right now. Next slide. With this amendment for $75 million, the total contract for the JV will be about $870 million. Next. And staff recommends approval of the executive director's recommendation. Are there any questions?
George, I have a question just on, as we think about the material costs rising, where that puts us. It looks like there's a process by which you'll figure out the final GMP or the remaining GMP as we move forward. What's the airline's commitment with respect to cost overruns? I assume the budget is the budget. That's what they've approved, and we need to get the project done in that window. Is that right?
Correct. We have the airlines have approved the 1.65 billion, and our goal, our plan is to manage the project at 1.65.
Great, thank you. Commissioner Alexander.
Yeah, George, this is impressive. I mean, it's mind-boggling, everything and how it's moving forward. One of the visuals you showed was the roofing overlay, and it looked to have been a wood composite. Is that one? Is it Oregon sourced materials, and did any of the fires of last year impact supply line implications or anything like that?
No, luckily the mills survived. Although they were really close, the fires were very close to them, but it has had an impact both in a cost standpoint with the price of lumber, the price from the mills. I'm sure as everybody knows, the price of lumber has really skyrocketed this year. We bought most of it and locked in the price, but we've had about a $2 million hit overall because of the price of lumber going up. But the vast majority of the wood is local, and it's been spread out to both some commercial loggeries as well as tribes, small family farms. And we're trying to make sure we have a good opportunity to share the prosperity that this project is going to do with the community and not just procure clear-cut woods. We really had a real focus not to do that. And I think most of the logs, if not all of it, is going to be FSC certification. I think all of the lattice is FSC certified, Forest Stewardship Council. And on the glulam beams, I think it's about 80% is going to be FSC certified.
Great. Thanks very much.
Sure.
Madam President, I wonder if I could ask Vince to just speak to the airline question, just to clarify. The number is the number. That's our budget, but there is the airline approval. Vince, would you just speak to that? Because we have some flexibility without having to go back to them. It's worth just noting, we don't intend to do that, but I don't want to mislead you in the response here. So Vince, would you speak to that just briefly?
Sure. Yeah, the budget that they approve is 1.65 billion. There is a room for 10% of that as long as it stays within the scope of the project. So if there's a field condition, a material cost, that's all within the scope. What we don't want to do is to just start to add in a whole bunch of other things, right, that they didn't approve that were part of the scope. So that's not part of that. So but we do have 10% to allow for those kinds of just impacts that could happen in the life, especially on a project of this magnitude and length of time.
Thank you very much for that. Other questions? Commissioner Alexander, I'm not sure if you're raising your hand again or.
No.
Okay.
Developmentally delayed.
So if no further questions, I'll take a motion and second to approve the executive director's recommendation.
So moved. Second.
Thank you. Pam, would you lead us through the roll call vote, please?
Commissioners Alexander,
Aye.
Cooper Comas,
Aye.
Lamb,
Aye.
Levy,
Aye.
McDonald,
Aye.
Nemi,
Aye.
O'Halloran,
Aye.
Sumput,
Aye.
and Strader.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Chris Zarnecki is back to introduce our final agenda item.
Hey, hello again, and thank you. This next item requests approval to award a public improvement contract for work to install a new electrical feed from Pacific Power at PDX and extend that feeder into the new terminal core. This project's a result of years of extensive study and analysis about our power needs and our resiliency at PDX, electrical resiliency. And so this will provide some critical infrastructure to support that and the growing operations at PDX as well, while improving our resiliency in the event of a major seismic event. So Alan DeKessian, project manager, is here to present the recommendation to award the contract.
Thank you very much, Chris, and good morning, everybody. We can go to the next slide, please. This agenda item requests your approval of a public improvement contract awarding to Northeast Electric for the Kennedy Feeder and Killingsworth Extension Project in the approximate amount of $2.75 million. Next slide, please. Tying into the background that Chris just gave you, we have completed several large projects at PDX, as you all know, recently, the quick turnaround facility for the car rental operations. Last year, we completed the T-Bell project, which was the extension of Concourse E. This year, we're completing new Concourse B and the Packer and Rental Car Center project. So lots of new construction, not to mention the work that George is doing on T-Core. So all of that adds up to an increase in our demand for electricity. We also have, as Chris mentioned, identified needs to improve the ruggedness, the resilience of our electrical service. So that's the genesis of the project, adding a new feeder from Pacific Power and improving the resilience of one of our other main feeders, the Killingsworth feeder. And I'll show you a little detail of how that works here in a bit. Some more background. Back in March of 2020, Commission approved a change order to the Hoffman-Skanska joint venture to perform some construction on this project. That ties into what George showed you earlier, the boring work for the fuel lines under Concourse C and in the alleyway. I'll show you how that works in conjunction with this project. And then earlier this year in March, you folks approved award of a contract to Pacific Power, our utility provider, to do the piece of the project that they're executing. So next slide, please. Okay, here are the messy details now. You can see the way the project has been split up to optimize costs. The first segment, segment A, is really the Pacific Power work, bringing the feeder from their Kennedy substation down 42nd and across Columbia and down 47th Avenue to our property at the corner of Northeast Cornfoot and Northeast 47th, where the Boeing hangars are. So they bring everything down to our property. And then coming from the north, the work I mentioned earlier that coordinates and is actually executed by the T-Core project, the green segment C is the boring underground to create the pathway to install vaults and conduit for the Kennedy feeder, but then also to service the other piece of the project, which is shown in yellow, segment D. There's an existing feeder from the Killingsworth substation that, in addition to serving the central utility plant, we plan to bring into T-Core so that it has two pathways into the facility. And that, again, provides us flexibility and resilience in the event of a seismic event. So T-Core is performing the underground work on segments C and D. They're creating the pathway for us. And then the final piece of the project, which is what I'm requesting your approval for today, is segment B. The $2.75 million contract will construct that segment. It'll extend the new Killingsworth feeder all along that red pathway till it hits what we call the Kennedy Killingsworth vault, the junction of the red, blue, and green segments. At that point, our contractor will then run the cable for both the Killingsworth feeder coming from the east and the Kennedy feeder coming from the south through that pathway, the green pathway that's identified as segment C. So all of that cabling is in this contract. So hopefully that clarifies how we've segmented the project. We can have discussion of that if you're interested. Moving on to the next slide. Thank you. The schedule just shows with your approval today, we should enter into the construction phase and be fully complete by the end of next year. Next slide, please. The project budget is $12.12 million at the bottom line, and that consists of the $2.75 million that we're asking for approval of today. Previous amendment to the T-Core design contract that George manages for $167,000. The previous amendments to the Hoffman-Skanska joint venture construction contracts of $3.27 million. The work I mentioned that Pacific Power is executing, the customer requested work authorization or agreement, excuse me, almost $2 million. Port staff and contracted services at about 2.4, a 10% contingency on the estimated costs. That's very reasonable for this type of work. Underground work carries inherent risks. So that all rolls up to the 12.12 million. The project overall will be funded 88% by the airlines and 12% by the port. We were given a 10% goal for small business participation in the competitive bid process for this contract, and the low responsive bidder, Northeast Electric, proposed 13.3% participation. Next slide, please. With that, staff requests your approval of the executive director's recommendation. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Any, excuse me, any questions from the commission? Well, thank you for a good presentation. I'll call for a motion and second of the executive director's recommendation.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Pam?
Commissioners Alexander,
Aye.
Cooper Comas,
Aye.
Lamb,
Aye.
Levy,
Aye.
McDonald,
Aye.
Nemi,
Aye.
O'Halloran,
Aye.
Sampat,
Aye.
and Strader.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Pam. That is the end of the agenda, so the meeting is adjourned. Thank you, commissioners.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam.
Thank you.
Thank you.